Throughout most of this course, we have been looking at curriculum planning for preschool children ages 3 to 5. In this module, we'll look specifically at planning curriculum for infants and toddlers. These are the module level objectives for the infant and toddler module. And as you've probably noticed, I'm not going to go over these in depth because there are other resources in the module, including the textbook, to help walk you through these objectives, especially the typical development. There is a lot to say about typical development of infants and toddlers because for infants, we are basically talking about children from birth up to about age 1, or when they start walking. Toddlers are from about the age of 1 to 3. So there's much change that happens really all the time. With infants, a newborn is much different than a 2 to 3 month old baby, and so on. They change so rapidly that typical development for each age is going to look different. So curriculum planning for infants and toddlers. Some of the things we've talked about with curriculum planning, some of the considerations are going to be the same. For older toddlers, of course, as they get closer to the preschool age, it'll be more similar to what we've been discussing throughout the course. Infants, of course, require a little bit more care. The ratio is much smaller, less children per adult. The younger the baby, the more he or she will be sleeping, so that can help some. But if one adult is responsible for 4 infants, that's still a lot of infants to be responsible for. But the curriculum planning, the teacher should always be very responsive to the child, but particularly with infants. Young infants should be fed on demand. They need to be changed right away if their diaper is soiled. And we really have to pay attention to what state they're in, if they're drowsy or if they're asleep or if they're alert and active, and respond accordingly to those cues. The environment is going to be a bit simpler, but there should be toys and books and materials that the infants can access. Once they're mobile and able to crawl around, they should be able to access materials, and they should be on low shelves near the floor that they can reach. The curriculum is going to be centered around those care routines because, again, younger infants are sleeping much of the day, and when they're awake and alert, they are going to be learning about the world around them, but they also spend a great deal of time being fed and changed and so on. As far as typical and atypical development, as I mentioned, the textbook is a great source, as well as the early learning standards for what children should be learning at different ages and stages. What I really want to point out for typical development is that there's much variation in the growth and development of individual children. So we do want to pay attention for those developmental milestones. If a parent or a caregiver has concerns about a child's development, it's best to maybe start with a screening tool and then get further assessment done if there seems to really be an issue with the child's normal milestones and progression of development. We don't want to ignore it because typically the sooner we intervene and get the child the help he or she needs, the better. So just an example of this variation in growth and development is that the average age of a child walking seems to be about 12 months or a year old. Some children do it much earlier, 9 or 10 months old, and some do it much later, around 14 or 15 months would still be normal. So again, it's right to be concerned if you notice that a child isn't reaching a milestone when you think that they should. And again, you can follow through with that, but we always need to remember that there is much variation and that every child is different. Nurturing relationships is really the foundation of infant care. Really, no matter what age group you teach, you need to remember that you have to build a relationship with each child and their family, but family connections are especially important with infants and toddlers because there are such strong ties to the parents, and especially before the child is verbal, the parents are the source of communication for the child's likes and dislikes and how they do things at home and all of those kinds of things. Infants should have a secure attachment with at least one caregiver, and a secure attachment begins with the infant feeling safe and that their needs are met. And, some parents and caregivers think, okay, it's time for the child to sleep. He or she has been fed and changed, and I'm just going to let them cry it out. The problem with that is that crying is communication to the adult. So that child is crying for a reason, and if that need is not met, then the child does not feel safe and doesn't necessarily learn that that caregiver can always be trusted to meet their needs. So even the need to be held and comforted, if the child is just wanting to be held and close to the mother or caregiver, or if they're cold or whatever it may be, we do need to respond to an infant's cries quickly. The same for toddlers. They should be comforted and we should respond to their cries as well. One of the objectives for this module is supporting development in different domains for infants and toddlers. I want to focus specifically on motor development for a minute because there's a few things I'd like you to keep in mind with motor development in infants and toddlers. Infants and toddlers really need to have freedom of movement for most of the day. So I made the note here that even older infants can sit at a small table and eat a meal or a snack with other children. My son was probably about 6 or 7 months old, and he attended a Montessori child care center, and that's what they did. They had very low chairs, a small low table. The chairs had armrests on each side, and once he could sit up, then he was able to sit at that table with the other children and eat. And that was really nice because he didn't need to be strapped in, and he was more independent in eating his meal, and he could get up and leave when he was finished. So that was another plus. But infants especially are often strapped into car seats, high chairs, swings, strollers, and different devices, and they don't have the opportunity and the time to practice the motor skills that they should be learning, such as rolling over, crawling, stretching, reaching for objects, all of those things. So we really need to pay attention to that. A lot of great early childhood centers do take children out in strollers, but those children should still have outdoor time when they're not in a stroller, where maybe you take a blanket out and let the children move around and play outside, and a few toys. Swings, again, can be used if it comforts the child and helps them go to sleep, but not for long periods of time. So that is all I'm going to cover in this short video intro to the module. But again, please look through the resources available and realize that infants and toddlers is a time of, again, very quick growth and development. It's a very exciting time.